Okay, here in After Effects, let's jump right in and see what we can do with this render from Cinema 4D. So let's go ahead and import our AEC file that Cinema 4D generated. And with that, we're going to get a folder here. We're going to get our main snowflake RGB comp that has our main RGB pass, and then we have our special passes here. So these are going to be our Luma mats. Let's go ahead and go through here real quick and just double click, see what we've got. And let's go ahead and name these so these make sense here. So we're just going to call this main floor. And so let's call that the right floor. I believe this is the left. So I'm just renaming these to make it easier once we get into multiple layers here. Because sometimes it's tough trying to remember which one is which. Okay, so it's the right. Let's see, let's call it maybe and this should be the left. Now that we've got those renamed, let's go ahead and open up our Snowflake RGB comp and see what we have in here. So we have our camera. We have a ribbon null here, so this is marking right where our ribbon is, and then we have our Snowflake RGB. And if we just scrub through here, we can see our animation. Let's go ahead and bring this down to 1/4. Now it's not very exciting right now because it's obviously just a grayscale image and there's not a whole lot of life to this, but let's take a look at some different ways that we can colorize this in After Effects. And this is kind of nice because I've done projects where the color palette hasn't been set yet, but I needed to get the render started. So I used some of these techniques to go ahead and colorize it afterwards, just to get a jump start on that render out of Cinema 4D. Obviously this render was short, but you know, renders can take a little while. So let's go ahead and change the color of this banner to start. So I'm gonna just rename this to RGB so that it's nice and short. I'm gonna duplicate it, Control D. And let's go ahead and take our banner Luma mat, bring it down, and we're going to change the track mat here to Luma mat. Now if you don't see these options, you can hit F4 on the keyboard and that'll toggle your track mat options. So one way we can do it is if I select the RGB2, because this is the duplicate, I can come in here and find the hue and saturation effect and apply it to this RGB pass. And once I do that, I can click colorize and we can increase the saturation of that banner, and we can also change the lightness of it. So if I come out here, so that's a nice way to do that real quick and easy, and obviously we can change the color of it just by scrolling the hue angle here. Okay, so we can do that for just about all the elements in this image. Now a new way that I've been playing around with colorizing things here is instead of using hue and saturation, which works great, one thing I don't like about it though is if I want a very specific color, sometimes it's hard to use that hue angle to get the exact color that you want. So let's take a look at another example. So if I open up the Adobe Color extension in here, let's move some stuff around so that we can see it. And I'm actually going to just jump over here to Explore. And I'm just going to find one in here that I think is attractive for right now. But I want some contrast too. I don't want anything that's like monotoned. Let's go with this one right here just for right now. And let's take a look at using a filter called the tritone. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to apply it to this RGB2, and so that we're only affecting the banner because we're using this Luma mat here. Now for the midtone, we can select the eyedropper and we can pick a color over here. And so this is really a nice way to colorize and be able to pick specific colors over here. Okay, so let's go ahead and work through this and see how we can utilize this theme and colorize some different parts so that we get kind of a more polished look here. So what I'm going to do is on the RGB2 and the banner, I'm going to select both of them. I'm going to hit Control. Let's make sure they're both selected. I'm going to hit Control D. And on this one, I'm going to replace the banner with something else that we want to colorize. So let's go in and select the main snowflake. And I'm just going to hold down Alt and drag it over top of banner. And so now they are the same color. And obviously I don't want them to be the same color. I want a little bit of difference there. So let's go into RGB3 and select the midtone, and let's change the color. Okay, so I chose that mint green one. Alright, moving along. Let's go ahead and duplicate this set, Control D, and let's take a look at what else do we want to color here. So let's go ahead, and one thing that I want to do is maybe colorize the floor, right? So this whole scene is a little bit dark. It's a little bit too blue. So let's go to, where's our floor? Right there. I'm going to hold down Alt, drag it down. And that's a little bit over the top. I don't want that color, but we can go in here to RGB4, select midtone, and let's find a color that we think would work well on the midtone. And I kind of like that right there. That looks pretty good. Now, if it's a little bit too saturated, we come in here and get the hue and saturation filter, apply it, and then we can go ahead and desaturate that just a little bit. Okay, and we can even change the lightness if we want. If you want something a little bit darker or lighter, I'm going to go something a little bit lighter, maybe a little less saturated. Okay, so this is coming along. Now, one thing that I want to look at is where we have these peel away holes here. I want to go ahead and increase the contrast there, just so that that ambient occlusion kind of pops a little bit more. Now, I could do it for each one of these holes, but I'd rather just do one duplicate RGB pass and do them all at once. Just kind of keep the project file moving a little bit lighter. So let's take a look at how we can actually combine these Luma mats to create one. So if we look at, so we have left floor, main floor, and right floor. Those are all, let's open one here. These are all Luma mats for the area, the hole in the floor. So I'm going to go ahead and take the left floor, drag it down, and create a new comp. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the main floor and the right floor as well. So right now, obviously we can only see the main floor, it's on top. Let's go ahead and choose main floor and right floor and change this to add. And so now we've been able to combine these Luma mats into one, but we have all the floor Luma mats together. So now I'll come in here for RGB4 and the floor, Control D, and on this floor we're going to go up here and replace it with this one right here. And let's just go ahead and rename that. Let's just call this floor, I don't know, let's call it floor holes. And hold down Alt, drag it down. And so this has our tritone effect and our hue saturation on it. And I don't want that. So I'm going to actually come over here and find curves. And we're just going to put a nice contrast curve on this. Just going to punch it up a little bit, but then bring those shadows down. Okay, so let's go in here to full and zoom in and take a look at the floor here. So if we turn this off and on, right, it's not It's not real drastic, but I just wanted to increase a little contrast in there. Now we could tint this as well if we wanted to. And I did leave those white when I rendered it out, and maybe I should have left them, you know, without a material, but let's just take a look at what it looks like with this tritone. So let's go ahead and select the midtones and maybe choose, I don't know, maybe this other color green. And let's do that with the shadows too. Yeah, and I don't really like that. That looks a little odd to me. So because of the way, because I left it white, it's not taking the color as much. Let's try taking this one. And that actually works out there. So if we do the highlights, maybe if we just do something that is off white, that looks pretty good. Okay, let's just check what that curves is doing. Okay, looks good. So one thing about how this thing starts off here is we can see our snowflakes on the ground. And I don't really like that. I want it to look like it's just a plain ground plane and we can't see anything. So for this snowflake here, let's do this. Let's go in here. So snowflake main. So here we are right here. And let's crank this up. Let's see. So we're still getting the color of the original render. So how can we tackle this so that we can slowly blend with the original so that it becomes this green over time? And maybe we don't even want to go all the way. Okay, let's take a look at how we can do this. I'm going to come out here, maybe right there, and I'm going to change this to 100% and set a keyframe. I'm going to click U on the keyboard so I can see it. And maybe right there, I want it to be at its full color transformation. So let's go ahead and change this down to 0. Okay, with both keyframes selected, we want to apply Easy Ease. You can hit F9. I'm using some recording software here, so I have to come up here to Animation, and then Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. We can jump over into the graph editor, and we can pull those handles just a little bit more, just so they ease a little bit stronger. Okay, and there we go. So one problem we have, obviously, is that we still see the outline of the snowflake on the ground there. And we want it to match the ground and then slowly change. So one thing that we're going to do is we're going to select our RGB3 and snowflake main, and we're going to Control D to duplicate it. And on RGB6 now, I'm going to delete this tritone. I'm going to come up here to RGB4, which is affecting the color of the floor. I'm going to select tritone and hue saturation, copy that, and paste that onto RGB6. Okay, so that it matches here. And if we zoom in, we can see one problem that we have with using Luma mats from Cinema 4D is you get this 1 pixel fringe around them, and it can be really frustrating. As you can see in this example here, the snowflake outline is still visible. So let's take a look at a way that we can combat that. So with my RGB6 and snowflake main here, these are the two layers that are basically, let's turn this off so we can see. This is the brown version of our main snowflake that we have on top of our green version here. So let's go ahead and select RGB6 and snowflake main, and we're going to go ahead and pre-compose those. So Control Shift C, and let's just call this main main snowflake pre-comp. And we'll say OK. Now one thing I want to do here, now if we solo this, now we have an alpha channel for our snowflake here. So now we can apply some other effects to this to fix our problem. So with simple choker here, if we apply that to our pre-comp and go negative, well, if we go positive, we can make the fringe more pronounced, but if we go negative now, we can get rid of that. So let's try -2. And it looks pretty good. I can see it a little bit, maybe right there, but like anything else, we have a trade-off, and we're gonna try and make it look as good as possible to where nobody is gonna be able to tell. Let's just take a look here. Let's come in at full res. So make sure you check it out at full resolution. So you can see it a little bit. Let's see if we can get away with going a little bit more. I don't want to get too carried away. Let's try -4. So one thing we have to be careful of is where these two overlap now. Okay, it's starting to eat into this banner a little bit. And actually, I'm wondering if we take the banner and move it up here. There we go. So let's actually put the banner all the way up at the top. And that seems to actually be fixing that problem. Alright, so let's do this. As this starts to come up, let's come back down here to RGB3 and let's look at the keyframes here. I'm going to come out here where it's all the way green, but we can't see it because of this top layer. I'm going to go ahead and turn off those keyframes, and this main snowflake PC, let's go ahead and keyframe the opacity of that. So T on the keyboard for opacity, and maybe right there we want it at fully green, and let's have it start changing maybe right there. So we can highlight those, come up to animation, keyframe assistant, easy ease, jump into the graph editor, make that just a little bit stronger. Okay, looks good. All right, so our smaller snowflakes now, those actually need to be changed as well. And so the only thing really affecting, so this very bottom layer that doesn't have a Luma mat, it's really only affecting our small snowflakes. So we can actually go to our floor, copy the tritone hue saturation, and go ahead and place that on this other, or on the just on this RGB that's at the very bottom of our layers, and it does not have a Luma mat, so it's going to affect everything, but the only thing that doesn't have its own Luma mat are these small snowflakes. Alright, so we're getting somewhere here. Now, one thing that I wish I would have done is these are peeling up away from the camera. Oop. And this one is peeling towards the camera. With hindsight, I would rather have them reversed. I'd rather have this one peeling up away and these towards, and then I could tackle this color facing the camera a little bit differently. But let's just see how we can work with this. So on these small snowflakes here, I like the top being the same color as the floor, right? So we cannot see them. But as they come up, I want the underside of my snowflakes to be a different color than everything else. And I think that'll look pretty cool. Now, we don't have a Luma mat that we can actually use that. We can't isolate the underside of these small snowflakes with. So we're going to have to jump over to Cinema 4D and render out a real quick pass for just the underside of those smaller snowflakes. So let's jump back over to Cinema 4D real quick, see how we can isolate just that region, render it out really quickly, and then bring it back over here into After Effects. Back in Cinema 4D, let's take a look at how we can render out a real quick Luma mat for the underside of those smaller snowflakes. So the first thing I'm going to do is come up here and do File and File Save As. And I'm just going to rename this and give it a new project file because, in case we mess it up, we have a backup. So I'm just going to call this Small Snowflake Luma. And let's go into the render settings here, and we don't need any of the multipass. We don't need ambient occlusion. We don't need global illumination, so this will be a lot faster. And I'm actually going to change our render to standard. And let's take a look at save here. So I don't want a compositing file. Let's change this to Snowflake Small Luma. And I think I'm actually going to change where it is. So just so it's easier to find, I'm just going to make a new folder here instead of hunting through all of our other renders. Okay, that looks good. We can come in here, and I'm actually going to turn off our lighting system. And I'm going to get rid of all these textures here. Let's do a quick preview, see what it's looking like. Okay, let's go into the options, and we need to turn off the default light. Let's do a quick render. So we don't see anything with that default light being turned off. So that's good, that's what we want. On this mat here, let's double check this. So let's turn off specular, let's turn off color, let's go into luminance and just make sure that this is 100% luminance white. And we're going to apply that to our small snowflakes here. So we drop it on to our snowflake. For selection, we want to put in here C. Well, I'm guessing right now it's going to be C1 or C2. Let's just try C1, hit enter, do a quick render. So we can't see it there, but if we come over here, we see that it's on top. So we need to actually change that to C2. And now if we do a render, we only see it on the bottom side. So let's move forward and hit render again, and we can see it just on the bottom side. So we'll do the same thing. I'm going to hold down Control and drag it down to our other snowflake, do a quick render, and now we are creating a Luma mat just for the underside of those snowflakes. Okay, so let's go ahead and render this out, and we'll jump back over to After Effects and take a look at how we utilize this Luma mat. Back in After Effects, let's import that Luma mat we just created. So the nice thing about creating Luma mats that way is they are really fast to render out, so it didn't take any time at all. I hit Control I, we go into Renders, Luma. Let's just bring this in as a TIFF sequence import. And so now we can come in here and let's go ahead and duplicate this banner one right here. So we're going to duplicate the RGB2 and the banner Luma mat, Control D. And we are going to replace the banner with our snowflake Luma. I'm going to just shorten this up a little bit on the name. Let's hold down Alt, drop it on top. And I think I just dragged it a little bit funny here. Let's try that again. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So they're not lining up, and if you take a look, my snowflake Luma is too short. So what happens is, if we take a look at our other footage, it's 24 frames per second, and that came in with that AEC file, and so it was telling After Effects what the frame rate was. If we look at the Snowflake Luma that we just imported, by default it's bringing in at 30 frames per second. So let's just right click the file and do interpret footage, main, and we just need to assume the frame rate is 24 frames per second. And so now we come in here and those line up. Okay. And I don't want those undersides to be the same color as our banner. So I'm going to come in here to my tritone effect and choose a different color. And let's do this. We can make it pink and then come in here to curves. And let's maybe just make it a darker color. And it's a little bit too saturated, so actually we can just come in here to the color, and on the saturation, let's bring that down. Okay, it's not bad. I don't know if I'm totally loving that, actually. Wondering, we don't have to pick a color from that palette. I'm wondering what blue looks like here. All right, I'm going to go with that. Okay, so kind of nice. Like I was talking about earlier, it would have been nice to maybe have this style of snowflake be in front here and then just colorize the bottom side, and then we don't run into that problem of seeing the snowflake in our floor ahead of time. But still making progress here. All right, so one other thing I like to do sometimes on renders like this is add just a little bit of lighting to it, and I'm going to do it real simply here, just using a little bit of optical flares. So I'm going to do a new layer. So we can come up here and do layer, new, solid, and I'm just going to make it black. Call this flare. Say OK, and I'm going to apply optical flares and just put it right up here at the top. Let's do a transfer mode of screen, and I'm going to scale this thing up and then bring the brightness down. Let's take it just a little bit off screen. Let's warm it up a little bit. Okay, so I'm not going to play a whole lot with the different optical flare types. If you have this plugin, you know that is an endless journey there. So find a flare you like, and now right now if we just leave it like this, it's just static and it doesn't look like it's really part of the scene because the camera's moving, but the optical flare is staying in place. Now obviously we could make ourselves a 3D light up here, and we could apply this to the light and all that good stuff. The only problem I have sometimes with that is sometimes when the flare is off, is just right outside of the frame, I don't really like how it behaves on the border. And instead of tweaking it and playing around with it, let me just show you a little shortcut that I do. So let's look at the position of the ribbon. And we can actually turn the keyframes off because it's not moving. I'm going to copy the position, Control C, and then I'm going to turn this flare layer, hit F4, into a 3D layer, and I'm going to paste the position in there. And we may have to tweak this just a little bit. Let's take a look at the scale, maybe. And so now when this thing comes around, right? It's moving with the scene, and it just looks a lot better. Now, I think what I might do is keyframe the brightness so that as this thing comes around, maybe just as that banner kind of completes right there, we have full brightness. And maybe right here, let's bring that down. Now the layer ends right here, so if you have a really strong optical flare, you'd have to obviously scale this up so that it fills the whole frame, but we should be okay right here. Okay, now one thing that happens sometimes is applying this optical flare above our ribbon and stuff. Sometimes it kind of washes things out. So one thing that we can do is create another custom Luma mat. So if we find our snowflake main and our banner, select both of those, drag down here to create a new comp, and we want a single comp, and let's say OK. Let's change this top one to add so that we have one Luma mat. Go back to our main comp and let's call this main plus banner, and we're going to bring it down into our scene. We are going to use this Luma mat on, and actually instead of a regular Luma, we want to go ahead and invert it. So now the opacity of this can control how much it shows up on our main snowflake and our banner. So I'm going to hit T, and if I bring this down all the way, we see that it's affecting it 100%, right? The opacity of the flare is the same all the way for everything in the scene. So as I crank this up, okay, you can see that I'm getting that color and detail back into my banner and snowflake. So I don't want it at 100%, but I don't want it at 0 either. I'm going to just do something right around 50 so that those just kind of pop out a little bit more. Let's actually close this panel. Alright, so one problem we're having now that I've done that is we can see our snowflake again. So if I crank this up to 100%, we see it really well. If I bring it back down to 0, we don't see it at all because of how much that flare is affecting our element. So let's start off at 0% again here, and then as it comes up and we see our snowflake anyways, let's come up to 50%. I'm going to highlight those, come up to animation, keyframe assistant, easy ease, jump into the keyframe editor, and let's just change it so let's ease it out. And I think I actually want to go ahead and move these down just a few frames. Okay, the last thing to do is let's just add a little bit text in this thing, and we'll just keep it nice and simple for time's sake. Well, let's do something a little bit. So we can come in here and I'm going to hit F4, make it 3D, and on the position, I'm going to make sure that I copy the position of this ribbon. Paste it in here. Let's bring it into position. scale it down just a little bit. And we're going to bring the banner Luma mat down in here. Hit F4, and we're going to set this to Luma so that it's already in position, and then we'll see it as that banner comes on. Okay, and obviously we can come in here and we can colorize that, and I think I actually just want to make it maybe this blue that's over here. Now one thing is, we just made it blue, it doesn't show blue here, and why is that? Oh, that's because I applied it to, I didn't do anything, I had the banner selected. So we gotta make sure we have snowflakes here, and let's just select this blue, and that looks horrible. Let's go lighter, I suppose. So maybe white is the best, because I don't know, I guess I'm liking it as white. Alright, let's do a quick RAM preview here. So there we have it. We created obviously our snowflakes in Adobe Illustrator. We took them over into Cinema 4D. We extruded those. We went ahead and made it look like they're peeling from the floor. We exported just a grayscale animation out of Cinema 4D, and then we explored some different ways to colorize it in After Effects. You really got to watch that little bit of fringe that occurs around the Luma mats. You know, you can pre-compose and do the simple choker, and that'll help. You may not be able to completely eliminate that fringe, but you can greatly reduce it and make sure that your renders are nice and clean. So hopefully you found some useful techniques in this project. If you use these strategies in a project that you're using, please shoot me a link. I'd love to see it. Thanks for watching.